I just wanted to just quickly explain how I got involved with cannabis. So I'm a community pharmacist, I'm a prescriber. And back in 1998, there was a huge, massive push, a campaign to see were there any therapeutic uses of cannabis. So on the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, I was tasked to go to join the Health Sector Committee on the House of Lords. And as the industry representative for pharmacy, I was totally overwhelmed by the amount of anecdotal evidence out there around cannabis. Huge. Apparently, Queen Victoria used it for labour pains, it was used for phantom limb operations, asthma, it was used for epilepsy, migraine. I mean, pretty much a pill for every ill sort of thing. I mean, it was just a miraculous thing. And it got banned because it became inconsistent. So really, it was a case to put to bed: is it good? Isn't it? Is it not good? And when you Google it, it's got so many hits on it. It's got something like 36 million hits on there around cannabis. So it's not something you can squash. I mean, only Dr. E. Jones has got more Google hits than cannabis, and that's and that's even better than Piers Morgan. So in that respect, I mean, clearly it's not something you can squash. And with something like that, you really need to tackle this rather than bury it, because it's not something you can do with it. And it's a really interesting thing about linking pain, because one of the biggest things around the anecdotal evidence that I work with chief scientists with around. No, I don't want to call any chief scientist. How embarrassing. It's I put it on silent. I don't want to call anyone. There you go, thank you. And one of the most interesting things was the biggest thing that kept coming back, were respectable people were using it, having to break the law to use it because where conventional medicine was not working. And one of the two biggest areas were around the anecdotal evidence was around pain and multiple sclerosis. So that's where we based our two major trials in Plymouth and in London around. We developed our own cannabis farms and we had the licenses and so on and so forth. So therefore, like Jay said, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to develop a link between pain, stress, and sleep. You get pain, you get stress. You get stressed, you can't sleep. You can't sleep, you get more stressed. Pain becomes more severe, becomes even worse. So what happens? You can't sleep, and it's a constant cycle. It's holistic. It then has a knock-on effect on your sleeping pattern. It has an effect on social circles, friends, work, output, quality of life goes, and then what happens is you get depression, so on and so forth. So it's not just about one thing. It's actually about the whole person, the whole holistic approach, and that's why it's extremely important that we need to break that cycle. And when you look at the survey that we did around respondents and pain, it's natural, therefore, if you're stressed because of COVID or whether you're furloughed or, as a community pharmacist, we see a lot of cases around stress now. Domestic violence, we're now safe haven. So if somebody's suffering, they come to us, which they never needed to before. Now that's been formalised. That's not from me, by the way. When you look at the fact that only 9% have admitted they experience a lot more pain, I'm surprised by that, because as a pharmacist, I'm definitely dealing with a lot more pain management issues. And as a prescriber, more and more people are coming asking for help. And as people are living at home now, there's less exercise, they're not going out as much, not traveling, and therefore they're developing back pains, they're not sitting properly. So it's actually, and I think you'll find that over the years, it's going to come out more and more obvious what's going on. Again, I'm really surprised, just like Jason, that a lot of these stats are actually not more, about a third, it makes them more miserable. Well, of course it would, unless they're paying for it. Pain is not something you want to take away. If anything, pain is like the thief of life. It takes away your freedom. It takes away your ability to do things, your quality of life, your independence. Who wants pain? That sort of pain. Then you talk about how it disrupts sleep. Again, I'm not going to touch much on it. So, on average, last year, respondents lost taking 2 work days off pain. It's actually a lot more than that. My experience is a lot more than that. I have a staff of 53, and I know that out of my own workforce, they've had far more days around pain and stress. So I definitely know that it's definitely a pandemic of its own way out there because of it. So the power of painkillers, we actually have, and I'm going to get shot down for this, we do actually have some amazing painkillers out there. It really does work really well. However, only for acute pain. Chronic use of painkillers can result in stomach ulcers, constipation, can result in liver and kidney damage, because that's where they get metabolized. We all know that one about the addiction, the dependence. And in all that, and then that would then lead on as you develop all that, and as you start taking it more and more often, those painkillers would start affecting your other chronic medication, your statins, your antidepressants, even the oral contraceptive pill. So in that respect, anything that affects your livers and kidneys, like painkillers usually do, is going to have a knock-on effect to other medication you might be needing. So that in a way, it's never a good idea to take chronic medication. And even if you do, like in the case of arthritis or in the case of heart pain, etc., then there are safer ways of doing it. So whilst we get older, pain is a natural form of life that we just have to learn how to manage. So it's not surprising that last year 20% would have taken a safe natural therapy, and now that's jumped up to 55%. So you can see why that's happening, though, can't you? Really, that's an obvious algorithm as to why more and more people are looking for a natural, healthy, safe alternative for long-term use. And CBD is something that's been on the horizon, on the scanner for a very, very long time. Unfortunately, it's steeped in urban legend. People confuse cannabis with THC, which causes hallucinogenics, psychotropic effects, time distortion. It can affect all sorts of things. All sorts of things. You know, you have this image of people who take cannabis as being hippies, when actually a lot of respectable people take it for medical conditions. There's a lot of urban legend here, so you're not starting from a blank sheet here, you're starting from on the back foot to try and give it some credibility and some credence and some provenance. And it doesn't help that there's a lot of products out there, because it's unregulated, that say they're CBD when there's actually no CBD in them. Or there is THC in them, the tetrahydrocannabinol, especially delta-8, delta-9, which can show up in drug tests. It doesn't help that there's a lot of misperceptions, myth perceptions, and myth busting needs to take place. So cannabidiol is one of those that you must not confuse with cannabis or THC. It comes from a different plant, Cannabis sativa, and that's not to be confused with the Cannabis indica lam, which has the high THC. Cannabidiol does not appear in drug tests. You don't get addicted to it. It's impossible. It does not make you high, and the purest versions of it are very legal and they're non-addictive, and they are very effective. And more people in my pharmacy are buying it based on word of mouth and previous experience. So we know how effective it is. It does not cause psychotropic effects. So let's draw a line under that. CBD is not THC, and it's not the classical cannabis that we hear about in the news and everything. And this is really important to know, that certain brands do have THC in them, but Dragonfly has 0, guaranteed. And in other brands you can have different varying levels of THC, but in this one there is none at all. So how does it work? Well, it's still an emerging science, but we do know that all medicines and drugs work on receptors in the body. And the endocannabinoid system has 4 kinds of receptors. The main 2 ones are CB1, CB2. CB1, cannabinoid receptors, are mainly in the brain and the nervous system. CB2 are in the peripheral nervous system, some in the central nervous system, but mainly in the muscles, tissues and organs. Which suddenly you can see how it has such a widespread effect on the human body, and you can understand how it's used for various things. So for example, when you think that it could work on the brain, then you can link migraine and epilepsy and think, actually, now I can see that link. When it works on the immune system, you can see why it could be used for pain, rheumatoid arthritis, how they used it for phantom limb pain in the past, period pain, etc. So you can suddenly see how it's all connected together because of the endocannabinoid system. But let me explain again. The research shows that CBD does not bond with this, mainly with the CB1 receptors in the brain that cause the psychotropic effects. There is no CBD psychotropic effect. It does not make anything. It may help you sleep better, but it does not make you lose time. You don't get that drug hangover the next day like you can get with the opiates, etc. But the most exciting thing for me as a scientific geek, because I'm very reliant on evidence-based, I'm very reliant on science as it develops and emerges, that we develop newer systems, is that it just doesn't affect the endocannabinoid system. To add to the magic of this, what it does do is it shakes hands with other endocrine systems, like the 5-HT1A receptors, which are in the brain. And what happens there is those control the dopamine and the serotonin levels, which cause anxiety, psychosis, and of course depression. So in that respect, it can also act as a crutch to elevate your moods in certain occasions. So it can have an indirect influence as well as a direct influence. But then again, if there's still any skeptics out there about, well, what about pain? Well, look, there you go. It also can affect the alpha-3 glycine receptors, which deal with inflammation, deal with pain, deal with immunity, hence lupus and things like that people are still struggling to treat. So in many ways, it's not surprising that, you know, nearly half of all the responsive use it to bust anxiety, stress, and then about a third for depression and sleep and relieving problems. So there is definitely some kind of science evidence there to already say that this is something we need to take far more seriously, and we need something that's quality assured, something that's consistent, with a consistent formulation, or something that's physically and chemically stable. And this has the integrity to do that. So I'll now pass on to Dr. Bond, who's just got not the same as the one that's just got film out recently, but he's just as smart.